5, fall to the right. Ready.
Right now.
Watch your dress, watch your dress.
Freeze it!
Fire!
Freeze it! Fire! Forward on the gun! Take the gun! Form a line right here! On the gun! Arms are ready! Fire!
Bowling Green was a site of strategic importance during the Civil War. A few years before hostility between the states erupted at Fort Sumter, South Carolina, a railroad connecting Louisville to Nashville and running through Bowling Green had been completed. Bowling Green was also the head of slackwater navigation on the Green and Barren rivers. These two elements made the town an important site for moving troops and supplies. Kentucky's official position of neutrality in the war was effectively ended when in early September 1861, Confederate troops seized the town of Columbus on the Mississippi, and the Union responded by taking Paducah. Both armies began to advance with designs on Bowling Green. On the morning of September 18, 1861, Confederate troops under Kentucky native General Simon Bolivar Buckner came up from Tennessee by rail and occupied Bowling Green. They began fortifications on several hills in the area, and a meeting in Russellville declared Bowling Green the Confederate capital of Kentucky. As a sign of the town's importance, General Albert Sidney Johnston, in charge of the Confederate armies from the Appalachian Mountains to the Indian Territories, moved his headquarters to Bowling Green. The city was so well defended that it became known as the Gibraltar of the West. The Confederates were definitely determined to keep Bowling Green or make the Union pay a high price to take it. Meanwhile, Union General Don Carlos Buell moved his Army of the Ohio towards the Green River. For Bowling Green, the war reached a climax when Union forces reached Baker Hill just north of town. With the enemy near, the Confederates destroyed the train depot and the bridges over the Barren, jammed the locks on the Green and Barren rivers with boulders and logs, and burned supplies that might be captured by the Union. The Union forces on Baker Hill began bombarding the town with cannon fire. In the turmoil, fire swept through downtown Bowling Green, destroying several businesses. The battle that might have been, however, was reserved for another place and another time. The Confederates decided that keeping Bowling Green wasn't possible in the face of Union victories at Mill Springs to the east and Fort Henry to the west, and the Southern forces retreated to protect Nashville. Bowling Green's fascinating role in the war between the states is remembered and celebrated during the Battle for the Barren, a 3-day event with an encampment and battle reenactment held on Baker Hill, the site of the Union's preparations to retake Bowling Green. The event gives both young and old the chance to experience the dramatic era of the Civil War. The encampment abounds with the sights and sounds of the period. The Confederate and Union camps give an authentic look at the everyday life of Civil War soldiers. Costumes reflect not only the military dress of the day, but also that of ordinary men and women. A period church service fills the cool Sunday morning air with singing and the strong words of a sermon.
Loudly sings the Holy One. I hear the noise of wings. Oh, come, angel band, come and around me stand. Oh, bear me away on your snow.
Union, we have Confederate. You all know the word union, of course, means united. The word Confederate means in company with. Actually, they mean the same, in company with and united. And everybody here today can be united and be in company with the body of Christ. It doesn't make any difference whether you're man or woman, young or old, black or white, north or south, whatever it be.
A brass band in full period military dress plays authentic Civil War era music. The encampment provides a wealth of educational opportunities with a Civil War museum. Actual Civil War artifacts are on display, as well as an abundance of educational materials. Children can interact with the exhibits and participants, and spectators hear the vivid details that make history come alive.
The National Congress of the Confederate States said, we need a flag that does what? That the people will follow. So they decided to take the battle flag and put it on a white background. That's this one. It's known as the second national flag. However, when the wind's not blowing, what does it look like? Surrender and truce. So by the time January of 1865 came around, they invented and approved the third national flag, which is this one. And all they did was put the red stripe on the end.
Merchants sell handmade wares that recreate the flavor of the day.
Okay, I'm going to make an ambrotype, as they did during the Civil War. And the first step is to make sure your glass is clean so you don't have any dust or things to get down in the chemicals, which will leave a speck on the plate. And this bottle is collodion. It's ether, ethyl alcohol, and a bunch of other nasties. I'm going to pour on this plate very delicately and hope for the best. Nice one. Okay, I made the plate light sensitive by dipping it in some silver nitrate and loaded it into my shield, is what this is called. And I'll hook this onto the back of the camera, pull the slide out and expose it. Ready? Now. Done.
The high point of the encampment, though, is the battle reenactment. The soldiers conduct drills, not only for the enjoyment of the spectators, but also to hone their skills and make the battle as realistic as possible.
Platoon, prepared with advance. Advance. Bisection. Fire by file from the right. Ready. Fire.
The reenactment itself simulates a typical skirmish between Confederate infantry and Union cavalry.
Yesterday and today, we just done reenacted a skirmish, a typical skirmish. And today, the Federals come towards us, and we drove them back. And we were very fortunate today to have an artillery piece, which we drove them back with. So it was back and forth for a while, and we acquired the advantage, and we done away with them. We drew them back.
The two sides represented today was a dismounted cavalry unit. That was the Union boys. That was my unit. We were portraying a cavalry unit that would have dismounted. The horses would, as normally would have been done during the war, the horses would have been hidden someplace protected. I mean, this concept of riding a horse onto the battlefield with sabers drawn, that's Hollywood, that's not history. To be historically correct, the cavalry used horses to get from point A to point B, then they dismounted and fought on foot. On the other side, they were portraying a relatively small infantry unit. Now, infantry, they are standard foot soldiers. They're the ones that come out essentially in blocks of men, shooting when there's lots of them, literally the sheets of lead. The real killing force of a battlefield is infantry.
The reenactment is staged so that both sides are able to act and react according to the situation, making the skirmish spontaneous and realistic.
The gun. We did spike the gun, meaning that you put a bayonet or some piece of metal into the priming hole and break it off. In other words, rendering the gun useless. And then we pulled back because they reformed a line and started to pour fire onto us. So it was basically a response in terms of trying to react to what they were doing while we were taking their guns. No, but the gun was taken.
Details such as rank are strictly observed.
I'm dressed as a lieutenant colonel, infantry officer, executive officer, and my job on the battlefield, normally I'll direct or help direct a regiment. My job here today was I was the field commander, and was to observe the skirmish, observe the battle, and as it built, make decisions on how to deploy the troops.
Well, I'm a corporal, and all I do essentially is keep lines straight, anchor the lines. If we have to pivot and break a line and form another angle, I'm either the guy who's going to swing out quickly or the guy who's going to anchor the line. And so I'm kind of a pivotal point, keep the guys in line, fill in the gaps. You know, that would be the job of a corporal, and sergeants, for that matter, were also did a lot of that kind of thing as well. Because, and here we kind of, not only from a Civil War standpoint, but also from a modern safety standpoint, you want to keep lines straight, because despite the fact that we're not shooting lead, we are using a full round of black powder. In other words, we're loading 60 or 70 grains of powder, which is about what it would take to propel a bullet out of here, okay? We're doing everything exactly the same way they did, except we don't load lead, all right? So, if you're in a line and somebody is a little bit behind the line or a little bit ahead of the line, and those guns go off, somebody's ear is going to get wrung, all right? It's just a safety factor. If you keep a straight line, nobody gets hurt, and essentially, you know, it's a hobby, and nobody's supposed to get hurt.
The weapons are also authentic, both to the time period and to the type of soldier in the reenactment.
Okay, this is the weapon of choice here for the cavalry. It's an 1859 Sharps carbine. Now, a carbine means it's a short weapon, all right? You know, it's a lot shorter than the tall muskets that they had on the other side. Being a short weapon, it means it can be fired effectively on horseback. As a matter of fact, I have, on a number of occasions, fired this weapon from horseback. Because instead of having to tear the round, pour it down, pull out the ramrod, do that kind of situation, when you're sitting on a horse, it becomes a very difficult thing to do. You go to half cock, and it's a little sticky because of it gummed up during the battle, but you drop the block, all right? The block will drop. You can load the paper cartridge into the block. You slap it back, the cartridge is cut. You would blow away any loose powder. You would take a percussion cap. I happen to have a couple left. Go to full cock, and then you can fire, okay? So essentially, a carbine is not only made to fire more quickly, but also specifically to be able to be fired from horseback. What they had were muskets, you know, the longer ones that were muzzle loaders, as I was trying to explain before, which was the standard weapon for the infantry. Their weapons had bigger bullets and had more accuracy and more range. So, of course, there's always, you know, limitations. There's pros and cons to every weapon. The other thing is that cavalry carried revolvers. And this one is a reproduction 1860 Army Colt, and essentially you go to half cock, and you have a free-moving cylinder, all right? And what you can do very easily is take the gun apart, throw one cylinder in, pull out one that's loaded. This is actually the old-fashioned way of changing a clip on a weapon, you know, as you see in modern weapons, and you're ready to go.
The skirmish is reenacted on 2 separate occasions, allowing both sides their chance to be victorious. As the sun sets, the cannons are lined up across the southern edge of Baker Hill to recreate the Union artillery fire used to speed the retreat of the Confederate forces back in 1862. The next morning, a memorial service honors those who died fighting for both the North and the South.
Ladies and gentlemen, we want to take this opportunity for just a few moments as a memorial service to both the Federal and Confederate forces that served at this location and throughout Warren County. Many of them spent many hot, cold, dry, muddy days upon this hill known as Fort Baker. Many of them laid on cots, on beds of straw with fever from measles, smallpox, dysentery. Many were buried in the cemeteries downtown as they passed away upon this site. This time we want to give them the honor that they so richly deserve. Fighting men were fighting men. There was no political agenda when it came to sickness and dying. But this time we'll, if you would, give them the reverence that they so richly deserve.
Ready? Aim!
Bowling Green has numerous other attractions that complement the Civil War encampment. Part of the rich history of Lost River Cave includes its use as a camp by Union troops. The Kentucky Library and Museum house an exceptional collection of historical materials dealing with the war in Kentucky. Civil War fortifications are still visible at 3 locations: Fort Lytle at Western Kentucky University, Fort C.F. Smith atop Reservoir Hill, or as it was called at the time, College Hill, and Fort Webb on the north side of town. A Confederate monument dedicated in 1875 is located in the Fairview Cemetery, and Riverview is a fully restored house whose foundations, begun in 1857, were used to store munitions during the Civil War. All of these exciting historic sites can be seen on Bowling Green and Warren County's Civil War driving tour. These sites and the encampment itself provide an exciting introduction to the rich history that Bowling Green has to offer.